Welcome back for part one of a couple videos for the PS4 collection. First up, we have my only Japanese import. Of course, SNK Heroines, Tag Team Frenzy. Next up, we have a double pack of some interesting indie games called 17-bit. Well, from the studio. Next up, we have Inside and Limbo, a great double pack that is definitely worth the price that it goes for on average. It's very reasonable, and two superb games. Next up, we have Little Big Planet 3, which is definitely a charming side-scrolling classic style platformer series. Next up, we have Pac-Man World Repack, which is basically from the ground up a remake of the classic original on PS1. Also, we have Pac-Man Museum Plus, which includes 14 different Pac-Man games. Some very interesting stuff. Next, we have Shovel Knight. Definitely a all-time classic. Skater XL, which is actually a pretty hard skateboarding game to get good at, as the definitely button configuration, everything is far more complex than Tony Hawk. Then we have this oversized cardboard box, which is only this big because of a stupid keychain. But whatever. I'm all about trying to keep original boxing in cases. And we have next Blue Fire, a really cool, charming style, very high difficulty action 3D platformer. And I do appreciate the art style, but no, there's a reason why some people refer to this as something in the Dark Souls-like, though I think maybe that's again starting to become a little overused term. We have Tearaway Unfolded, which is a charming, I think, hidden gem game, in my opinion. Then we have an anime-style soccer game, or football game, depending on where you are in the world. Definitely interesting, and this series has actually been around quite a long time. Another, in my opinion, hidden gem that is Concrete Genie. I love the unique art style and everything about the game. It's very unique and refreshing. Also, we have Crash Bandicoot, the Insane Trilogy, of course, remade from the ground up basically, and it looks a lot nicer now. But three superb games. Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, basically wiping all the other previous sequels under the rug as if they're, of course, no longer canon. Then we have Dragon Quest Builders, a pretty unique take on the world building style game that basically started with Minecraft, but Square adds its own charming spin on it, and I will say, I think of games that copied the style of Minecraft, this is maybe the best, in my opinion. And also, if you appreciate Dragon Quest, also series as a whole, I think you would appreciate this game, as it definitely holds that Dragon Quest charm to it. Next up, we have another indie game that actually became pretty big, surprisingly, with Hello Neighbor. Definitely not your traditional game, that's for sure. Also, Kingdom Hearts 1.5 plus 2.5 remix. And by the way, the music I chose in the background today is from Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. Next up, Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue, which includes the cinematic movie to Kingdom Hearts back cover, as well as the sort of demo, I guess you could say, at the time for Future 3 with Kingdom Hearts 0.2 Birth by Sleep, a fragmentary passage. Quite a mouthful. And of course, Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance HD, which is a good reason to actually pick this up because of the HD version of Dream Drop Distance, as it's arguably one of my personal favorites in the series. Next, we have the, of course, deluxe version of Kingdom Hearts 3. Quite a hefty thing. And last of the Kingdom Hearts stuff, Kingdom Hearts, of course, Melody of Memory. Next up, we have part 1 of the Mega Man Legacy Collection, which are all superb, great, very high difficulty platformers, along with Mega Man Legacy Collection 2, which includes 7, 8, 9, and 10. And of course, the more recent new edition, Mega Man 11, which I still need to eventually get around to doing a playthrough of this game. Like the old Mega Man's, it definitely has the same high difficulty curve. Next up, we have the spiritual successor, technically, to Mega Man with Mighty Number 9, which is a game I actually continue defending to this day, as I actually think it's a decent spiritual successor. I think a lot of people are just expecting way too much out of this Kickstarter funded game. Personally, I like it, and I don't think it deserves the hate it gets. Also, we have next Minecraft Story Mode Season 2, and I'm not sure where I put Season 1 at. Oh. Somehow I accidentally got it confused, so there. Minecraft Story Mode Season 1 and 2. Tall Tale games, which are definitely interesting. I was happy when I got my hands finally on Season 2. Also, Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch Remastered. Definitely a great, very beautiful, and also, as I've said before, very charming game. Another pretty cool game with Puyo Puyo Tetris 2, which is a weird combination of games that I actually end up finding myself enjoying quite a bit, more than probably a lot of people out there. Also, Raiden 5, which is a great classic on-rail shooter series. It's been around for over 20 years now. Going back to like the 90s. Definitely most of the games in the series have become collector's items. So if you ever come across any of these games for a good price, I recommend picking it up. Also, some other pretty cool stuff. We have Rhyme, a great, gorgeous looking indie developed game. Graphically, it looks a lot better than a lot of indie games out there. Definitely did get polish on the game, and I personally liked the puzzles and everything. The music is great as well. A gorgeous looking world. Also, a from the ground up remaster of course, Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. Though, if I understand, there are some people I have complained about apparently issues with the remaster. Another great Kickstarter funded game, which I do. It's another game I occasionally find myself defending, Ukulele, which is a great sort of spiritual successor, obviously, to Banjo-Kazooie. Because it feels a lot like a N64 game, but definitely does look better overall. Of course, the Spyro Reignite trilogy, another superb remaster from the ground up, for the most part redone. And I've said before, I'll say again, a second game in the series is my personal favorite of the Spyro series. Also, a recent addition, Stray, which got through the official company's website. Definitely awesome to have. Also, another interesting indie game, which that does definitely have some issues, I think, with hitboxes and stuff. That being The Girl and the Robot. It feels more like a game that would have been on like the PS3 in my opinion, PS2 or PS3 era. Also, my first, and I think about my only European import game, just about one of only a couple. Anima, Gate of Memories. Definitely an interesting game to say the least. Next up, we have, of course, the somewhat very hated Anthem. Yes, I get when it originally came out, but like I showed last year, when I played about 5 hours of the game, I was surprised actually how much I actually enjoyed, especially the flying mechanics. But Anthem is actually surprisingly a lot better than I ever expected it to be. Next up, Star Wars Battlefront, which I have very mixed feelings on. And I'm not sure why I have that messed up. I try to keep stuff alphabetized. Next up, an interesting game with Biomutant. It's actually a pretty good looking, decent, open world style game. If you're into 3D action games, this is actually some I highly recommend checking out, as the prices become very reasonable. Also, another pretty cool indie developed game with Bendy and the Ink Machine, which I need to do a record full playthrough of this game. It's quite interesting, heavily influenced by your like early era Disney and stuff of like the 1930s, which I actually really appreciate quite a bit. As a big fan of a lot of the early era Disney movies. Next up we have, of course, Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle. A pretty good overall attempt, I guess you could say. It's Arc System Works' attempt at like a Marvel vs. Capcom game, basically. Though they would perfect that, I think, with Dragon Ball. Next up, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, a superb game that I continue highly recommending. Also, and somewhat interesting, more mid-ranged developed game, which it is strange nowadays. We don't see a lot of mid-range developed games nowadays, sadly. It's either just indie or like AAA. Of course, Darksiders Genesis, which is a game, as I've already said before. If you like Diablo and stuff, you'll like this game. Also, Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin, which is a superb game and my favorite of the Dark Souls series. At least for me, anyways. Then we have Dead Cells, which is a great game that I highly recommend to anyone that has the opportunity. It is a great roguelike game. High difficulty, but can be quite fun and challenging, especially with the new DLC, of course, now out. Of course, then we have Destiny 1, the collection, and Destiny 2. Next up, we have Final Fantasy Dissidia NT, which is sad how this game basically bombed, unfortunately, though. It is a gorgeous game, and I actually think the gameplay is quite fun. It is a shame it did not do well. Sadly, outside of Japan, it did horrible. I personally still, from time to time, will go back and play the game some, but I get why it did not do as well as they had hoped. Definitely some issues with the game. Also, of course, Dragon Ball FighterZ. Definitely, when I did play this game, sadly, I don't find myself going back and playing the game a huge amount, as there's many other fighting games I prefer, like Grand Blue or Under Night and Birth. Even though I'm a big Uber Dragon Ball Z fan, I actually think I prefer games like Budokai series, personally. Unfortunately, of course, a very interesting, unique take on the original Dragon Ball universe with no Goku around to help, and you have to keep characters alive, definitely gives it a very unique feel and spin on the formula. It is nice when they decide to try something new. And a game I do still need to do a playthrough of course, that being Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Which is pretty cool, doing a full RPG around the game. In the fact it actually includes events and stuff storyline-wise, even with Adult Gohan, which is kind of refreshing. And other stuff. Next, we have another, in my opinion, underrated game developed by Atlas Games with Dragon's Crown, which is definitely a very interesting game to say the least. Next up, we have, of course, Dragon Quest XI, which this is the reverse side. I prefer it because it just gives more of like a classic Dragon Quest feel to it. And of course, the main character kind of reminds a little bit of Trunks. Also, Dragon Quest Heroes, an interesting game. Also, Dreams, which is some I actually highly recommend to people to check out, is the Dreams game. Also, Dungeons. Definitely an interesting series for the most part, Dungeons. Also, a pretty cool game that kind of reminds me a little bit, elements and stuff from like the Persona series, that being Dusk Diver, which is developed by a Taiwanese game studio, which is pretty cool. Also, Eve Valkyrie, which was unfortunately, VR exclusive, though it is a pretty fun experience, even if it's not very long. Also, Elite Dangerous, which is a pretty cool, good-looking space exploration game. If you like a lot of science fiction stuff, I do recommend checking out this game. Next up, Final Fantasy 15 Royal Edition. Definitely appreciate the classic artwork. Of course, Final Fantasy 7 Remake. Next up, we have Five Nights at Freddy's Core. Core Collection. We have 1 through 4 plus sister location. Then we have a really cool technical RPG tactical one, if you like that, with a yeah, somewhat simplistic art style, but still the game mechanics I think more than make up for it with For the King, if you like roguelikes and stuff like that, as it says right there on the cover. Next up, God Eater 2. Definitely pretty cool cover art. Now, at least for when I have played, God Eater 2 definitely adds on a lot from the first game, God Eater Burst, which was, of course, a PSP exclusive, though I still have a certain love and fondness for the first. Of course, Grand Blue Fantasy versus the original, which I love the fact it has that special RPG mode. It's one of the things that makes the game very distinctive, and I'm just waiting for Rises to get like a special physical release, as I will continue supporting this game, as I am quite a big fan of it. Of course, Gravity Rush 2, really good, I think solid sequel, though it still does not capture a certain charm the original had. But I still highly recommend checking the game out. Now, personally, one of only like 2 Guilty Gear games I actually have, with Guilty Gear XR2. Though the cool thing about this game is the fact that, of course, it's gotten rollback is awesome, and it's great to see a resurgence of the popularity of this game. It is really the only one I ended up finding myself actually playing and enjoying. Next, a really cool indie developed, of course, survival horror game, more based on Japanese horror, which I actually quite appreciate. Next up, Immortals Sphinx Rising, probably my favorite, more recent game from Ubisoft, personally. I like the aesthetic, the art style, and in general, as a big fan of mythology, definitely, I quite prefer this over a lot of other stuff they've been doing. Of course, Injustice 2, can't forget it. Love that design for Superman. Next up, definitely an interesting game. Journey to the Savage Planet is definitely different. It tries to be a space exploration game with elements kind of reminding me of a little game called BioShock, with just the presentation, the way things are done. Next up, of course, the Bandai huge crossover game Jump Force, which did not do huge numbers, unfortunately. Though I do find interesting the style they went with, but I'm just not as big a fan of the way the game plays. Another game I think is underrated, Kena Bridge of Spirits, which definitely has a charm about it. Of course, also can't forget Little Nightmares, which is great, and really heavily has elements that reminds me of something from, of course, the great Tim Burton. Also, of course, Little Nightmares 2, which in some ways is definitely, I think, superior and interesting, some of the twists. Another somewhat interesting, I guess, episodic game, but for VR, making it definitely interesting with Loading Human. Of course, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. That don't see myself ever stop playing on occasion here and there. Because the game mechanics, the gameplay is just that much fun, honestly. And the netcode being good also helps. Then we have, of course, the remake of the great Medieval. Classic from the PS1 era. Personally, I'm rather fond of the PSP remaster. Also, the collection of the Mega Man X series as my favorite Mega Man series of all time, as I've said more than once. Mostly, partially because I love the character of Sigma a lot more than Dr. Wily. Of course, also the Mega Man Zero/ZX series, which has a very high difficulty curve. That is for sure from the GBA era. Also, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which is a game I find myself enjoy quite a bit. Also, an interesting game, 3D action platformer, Monkey King, Hero is Back. I actually like the very cartoonish art style they went with, honestly. Of course, have arguably probably one of, if not about, maybe one of the most beloved, of course, Naruto games. Naruto Shippuden, of course, Ultimate Ninja Storm 4, Road to Boruto. And this is the best way to go as it includes the season pass content and everything. Of course, also, Neo. The World Ends With You. An interesting, very different style sequel from the original, as it went with a full 3D art style. Also, New Gundam Breaker, which basically is just, this feels like you're basically in Toy Story or something, as it's like the size of actual action figures, which was kind of a cool idea and concept. And the last for this video in part 1, Ni no Kuni 2, of course, special edition. And as you see right there, lets you know what and all you get. And just joking, actually one more. The biggest thing in the collection. Final Fantasy Type 0 HD. Which I absolutely love this game. As I've mentioned before, it's in my top 10 favorite Final Fantasies of all time, if not even maybe top 5. I don't know why more people don't talk about this game, honestly. With that said, I'll see everyone next time. Stay safe out there. See you again, same YouTube time, same YouTube channel.